The early morning air was already warm as Pesichet stepped out of her home in Memphis. The city was coming alive with the sounds of people and animals. Pesichet took a moment to breathe in the familiar sense of the city. She smelled bread baking and heard the distant hammering of construction. Pesichet smiled. It was a new day, and she was needed. Pesichet was a Sunu, a healer. She was one of the few women who practiced the art of medicine. She had learned her skills from her father, who was also a healer. Pesichet was grateful for her training. She knew that she had been given a precious gift, the ability to heal the sick and comfort the suffering. Pesichet entered her workshop. It was a small, mud-brick building located near the temple complex. The workshop was cool and dim, a welcome respite from the growing heat of the day. Pesichet went to her work table. It was covered with bowls of herbs, jars of ointments, and linen bandages. She carefully checked her supplies, making sure that everything was in its place. Pesichet began her day by preparing her remedies. She ground herbs into powders, mixed ointments, and rolled bandages. She worked carefully and methodically. Her work was important and she took pride in doing it well. Later that morning, Pesichet received an urgent summons. A worker at the temple construction site had been injured. Pesichet hurried to the site, her heart pounding with worry. When she arrived, she found a crowd of men gathered around the injured worker. The man was lying on the ground, his face contorted in pain. Pesichet pushed through the crowd and knelt beside the injured man. She quickly assessed his injuries. The man had fallen from a scaffold, and his arm was broken in several places. The bones had pierced through the skin, and the wound was bleeding profusely. Pesichet took a deep breath and began to work. She first needed to stop the bleeding. She packed the wound with a poultice of herbs, and then applied pressure to the artery in the man's arm. Once the bleeding was under control, she set the broken bones and splinted the man's arm. She worked quickly and efficiently, her movements sure and precise. As she worked, Pesichet prayed to Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of healing. She asked for Sekhmet's guidance and protection. She knew that the man's life was in her hands. Pesichet treated many patients that day. A young boy was brought to her with a scorpion sting. His mother wept as Pesichet applied a poultice of crushed dates and salt to the wound. She recited an incantation calling upon Serket, the scorpion goddess, to draw out the poison. A pregnant woman came to Pesichet, hoping to know the sex of her child. Pesichet gave her barley and emmer seeds, instructing her to water them daily with her urine. If the barley sprouts first, Pesichet explained, you will have a son. If the emmer sprouts first, you will have a daughter. Later that afternoon, a thin man with a shaved head visited Pesichet. He had a large, festering lump beneath his arm. Pesichet had never seen anything like it. She examined the lump carefully. It was hard to the touch and seemed to be attached to the man's flesh. Pesichet frowned. She had read about such things in her father's medical texts. The ancients called this ailment a tumor, but the texts offered no cure. Pesichet could only offer the man palliative care. She gave him willow bark to chew on for the pain and prayed for a miracle. As the sun began to set, Pesichet stood on the banks of the Nile. The great river flowed past her, its waters shimmering in the fading light. The Nile was the lifeblood of Egypt, and Pesichet felt a deep connection to it. She watched as the feluccas, their sails billowing in the evening breeze, glided across the water. She thought of the farmers who depended on the Nile's annual flood to irrigate their crops, and she thought of the sick and injured who came to her for help. Pesichet knew that her work would never be done. As long as there were people in the world, there would be sickness and injury. But Pesichet was not daunted by this task. She was a healer, and she would continue to use her gifts to ease the suffering of others. She offered a silent prayer to the gods, asking for their continued guidance and protection. Then, with a sigh of contentment, she turned and walked back towards the city, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring.